When you're in ihram, it's permissible to have a shower, to have a bath. You can do that. Maybe somebody is in ihram. By the time they get to Mecca, maybe it's been a long journey, they're tired, hot, and they want to go to the hotel, freshen up, have a shower first before starting the Umrah. Permissible. So you get your ihram and take it under your arm. Your shoulder and right arm is left open. Ihram under your arm. That's just for when you do tawaf. When you finish tawaf, and this is one of the biggest mistakes you see them doing. When you finish tawaf, you're supposed to put it back on again. The sa'i is done normal, not with your arm out. There's no indication to the Yemeni corner. The indication is only to the black stone. So if you get to touch the Yemeni corner, excellent. If you don't do any pointing to the Yemeni corner.
وقل رب زدني علما.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Today then, as you're aware, we're going to do a slightly different lecture to the normal book, and that is a lecture regarding the rites of Umrah. How is Umrah performed? What are the acts that are permissible, that are impermissible? What are the rulings? How do you fulfill and perform the rites of Umrah? So it's going to be summarized. We're going to summarize the main things that everybody needs to know when you go on Umrah. So to begin with then, assuming now a person has traveled across and you are there, or you are en route, what are the first things that you need to think about? Before you actually go into ihram, and that could be from different locations. Maybe you're already in Medina and you're going to go into ihram from Medina. Maybe you're going to go into ihram from here, boarding the flight, before boarding the flight. So wherever it is, before you go into ihram, there are certain types of things to bear in mind. One of them is, it is a sunnah to have a ghusl before going into ihram. يسن الاغتسال مع تسمية الله. It is sunnah to do the ghusl in the name of Allah. You begin and do a ghusl. وتطيب البدن بما لا لون له وللرجل دون المرأة. So to do a ghusl before you go into ihram, and to wear perfume for the men. For the men to wear some perfume, and that perfume can be put on your skin, not on the white ihram clothes. So right now, this is before you go into ihram. You have a ghusl, and you can put perfume on yourself, not on your white ihram clothes, on your own body only. For the men, the women of course don't do any perfume. That is the first thing. Also, when you go into ihram, there is no specific prayer connected to going into ihram. Some people think, and they may have some opinions, that you're supposed to pray 2 raka'at when you go into ihram. There is no prayer specifically for the ihram itself. However, maybe the confusion, or maybe why there is this understanding, is because if you go into ihram from Medina, if you go into ihram from the Medina checkpoint, from the Medina miqat, which is known as Dhul Hulayfa, then you can pray 2 raka'at for that location. فيصلي ركعتين لبركة وادي العقيق فقط. You can pray 2 raka'at for the blessing of the valley of Al-Aqiq, where that checkpoint is. Because remember, you have the Haram in Mecca, and then around it, in all the different directions, there are these checkpoints. Not physical checkpoints with police, not those. Islamic kinds of checkpoints, known as the mawaqit, the miqat, like a kind of checkpoint. The meaning of it is you're not supposed to go past the miqat until you are in your ihram and you've made your intention. You are not supposed to go past the miqat until you have gone into your ihram. And these miqats, these kind of checkpoints, they are all around the Haram of Mecca. You have the Haram of Mecca, there's a checkpoint on that side, on that side, on that side, on that side. There are checkpoints around it. And remember, these checkpoints, we're not talking about like police checkpoints. We're talking about Islamic boundaries. Islamic boundaries. And these boundaries are not equal around the Haram. Some of them from the Haram are very close, but in other directions they are very far. And then maybe in the other direction it's a middle kind of distance, and maybe in that direction it's close again, and in this direction it's a far one again. The furthest one from Mecca is in the direction of Medina. The Medina miqat, the Medina boundary, is maybe like 200 miles away. So if you're coming from Medina going to Mecca to do Umrah, the miqat, this boundary, the Islamic boundary, is right next to Medina. You barely come out of Medina and it's there. And it's called Dhul Hulayfa. So that is a blessed kind of place. If you do your ihram from that miqat, because you're coming from Medina, you can pray 2 raka'at in Dhul Hulayfa. Because of that valley being a blessed valley, etc., you can pray 2 raka'at there, as Shaykh Al-Albani mentioned. But there is no 2 raka'at specifically for the sake of the ihram. The Messenger prayed, but the scholars, they say that was because of the sunnahs he was praying or other things he was praying. It wasn't specifically to do with the ihram. So if you come in from the other sides, there's no prayer that you have to pray. But if you come in from the Medina side, you can pray in Dhul Hulayfa for the blessed area that is. So that is the second thing to note. The third thing to note is that for the men, you obviously wear the ihram, and that ihram is basically the 2 pieces, the upper piece and the lower piece. فلبس ملابس الإحرام من إزار ورداء. So you have to wear the upper garment and the lower garment. غير المخيطة للرجل. And it cannot be tailored to the body for a man. That ihram cannot be tailored to the shape of the body, tailored onto the body. And that's something to understand as well, because some people, they think you're not allowed to have any type of stitching. That isn't actually what it's about. It's not about not being allowed to have any type of stitching. It's about not being allowed to have stitching and tailoring to the shape of the body in any way. As for having some stitches on your ihram for some other reason, maybe there's like a pocket or something that you want to stitch into it or something along those lines. Stitching isn't haram. It's about the fact that you are stitching it to the shape of your body in any way that is haram. That's why you can wear those belts you see the muhrims wearing, those white belts, and they've got stitching on them. You're allowed to keep your watch on, that will have stitching on it, some types of watches. Stitching isn't the problem, it is the fact that the garments are on the shape of the body. So you cannot have anything stitched to the shape of your body. So the men must wear that ihram and they must not cover their head. The ihram is on the shoulders down and on the lower area, not covering your head in any way. And you need to put that on before you get to the boundary, before you pass the boundary. You cannot pass the boundary until you have put that ihram on. As for the woman, then there are no specific clothes that she has to wear. المرأة لا تنزع شيئا من لباسها الشرعي ولكن لا تنتقب ولا تلبس القفازين ويجوز لها السدل على وجهها دون شد النقاب عند مرور الرجال. So the woman doesn't have any specific clothes to wear. She wears her normal clothes. But one thing is, she's not supposed to wear a specific niqab or gloves, as some of them mention. And she is allowed to cover her face with her garments generally if there are men, etc. But not to wear a specific niqab. And whoever is not able from the men to wear those specific ihram garments, whoever is not able to wear those garments, then it is permissible to find whatever else resembles them. It's not a condition you have to have two white cloths. If a person doesn't have two white cloths, whatever else is as close and resemblant to that, two pieces of cloth generally, then you can wear that, and that is covering of your need for ihram. Then, so those are just some of the prerequisites. You've got to make sure you have your intention before you go past the miqat, before you go past the boundary. Those boundaries are all around, so wherever you're coming from, if you're coming from Yemen, there's a boundary down there. You're coming from Medina, there's a boundary. You're coming from Iraq, there's a boundary. From here, from the UK, you're flying in, there's a boundary on the way to Jeddah. There are boundaries around the Haram. The longest one is the one in Medina. All the others are quite close by. So you must have your ihram on before you pass the boundary. You must have your intention before you pass the boundary. You should do a ghusl before you put your ihram on. Put the perfume on for the men onto your body, not the ihram garments themselves. Then, now let's assume you are in ihram. When you are in ihram, you have now made the intention. Now once you have entered into ihram, there are certain things that are prohibited and you are no longer allowed to do them. Mahdhurat al-ihram. And there are a few. One of them is hunting. You're not allowed to hunt animals. Hunting is not permissible when you are in the state of ihram. As-sayd, az-zawaj wal-khutbah. You're not allowed to marry when you're in the state of ihram. Neither are you allowed to propose or get married in the state of ihram is not done. Neither are you allowed to cut your hair when you have now gone into the state of ihram until you actually finish the umrah, then you cut your hair. But prior to that, cutting the hair is not allowed. فَقَصُّ الشَّعْرِ, not permissible. Also, تَقْلِيمُ الْأَظَافِرِ, cutting the nails, trimming the nails is not permissible when you're in ihram. And putting on perfume. For the men, women obviously no perfume, but for the men as well, not allowed to put on any perfume now. You were allowed to put some onto your body before you got to the boundary, before you went into your intention of ihram. Have your ghusl, put on some fragrance. But now that you are in ihram and you started, you can't add any more fragrance now. No more fragrance can be added now, used now. And as for the woman, she does not wear the niqab, the specific niqab is not to be worn in the state of ihram, or gloves. And the man does not cover his head. تغطية الرأس للرجال من محظورات الإحرام. So a man is not allowed to cover his head in any way when you are in the state of ihram. And one of the rulings of the haram area, there is a sacred sanctity zone around Al-Masjid al-Nabawi and Al-Masjid al-Haram. In the Sunnah, in the Hadith, it tells us there is a sacred, like a sanctity, a sanctuary, a zone around the Prophet's mosque, a significant zone, far out. And around the Haram Kaaba, far out, going into Mecca. There is this zone. It's in the Hadith, it tells you exactly from this place to that place. If you go to Medina now, you go near the University of Medina, that's where one side starts. There's a big sign there saying the Haram area starts here. And then you go to the other side of Medina and you'll see a sign there, Haram area here. So there's this huge area of Medina known as the Haram area, the Haram zone. And in Mecca as well, a huge area, big area we're talking, which is the Haram zone. In those Haram zones, which are in Bukhari, etc., they tell you exactly where those zones are. You're not allowed to cut or pull off the leaves of naturally growing trees. Not man-made, planted, but naturally growing trees. You're not allowed to cut their leaves or to take their leaves. قطع الشجر الحرم. Not allowed to take from the naturally growing leaves and trees. So that is the list of things that are impermissible. Hunting, marriage or proposal, engagement, any of those things, cutting the hair, trimming the nails, perfume, the niqab and gloves for the women, covering the head for the man, and taking or cutting or pulling the leaves off naturally growing trees. That is the list of things that are impermissible when somebody is now in the state of ihram. What are the kinds of things that are allowed? There are things that people may think are impermissible, but they are actually allowed when you're in ihram. فمما يباح للمحرم يجوز للمحرم أولا الاغتسال. When you're in ihram, it's permissible to have a shower, to have a bath. You can do that. Maybe somebody is in ihram. By the time they get to Mecca, maybe it's been a long journey, they're tired, hot, and they want to go to the hotel, freshen up, have a shower first before starting the Umrah, permissible. You're in Ihram still. You haven't gone out of the state of Ihram. You are in Ihram, but you can have a shower. You can even change your Ihram clothes. You got another set in your bag, put the new fresh one on if you want. Nothing wrong with that. So maybe somebody goes from here, you put it on the aeroplane, maybe you end up spilling some food on it or drinks on it, and then it gets dirty in the taxi at Jeddah airport or whatever. By the time you get to Mecca, it's gone dirty. So you've got another one spare, no problem. You go to your hotel, you have a shower, you put your new ihram on, and you go do your Umrah, perfectly okay. Because remember, when we say you are in the state of Ihram, that isn't the clothes. Your state of Ihram is your intention that you are now a muhrim. You are now doing Umrah. The clothes are just a part of it. You can change those, you're still in Ihram. So that is okay to have a shower, to change the Ihram clothes, that can be done. Also, scratching your head or scratching anywhere, permissible. Some people they say, no, don't touch yourself because maybe some hair might fall out. Yes, of course, maybe that could happen. Maybe some hair might fall out, but that doesn't break your ihram, and that isn't something impermissible you've done now. You know, you have a scratch and you scratch your head and a hair falls out because of that. That is not what we're talking about as a prohibition. You haven't done that on purpose, you haven't pulled anything out. You scratched your head or your arm and a hair fell out, that's not a problem. So if you have a scratch or something like that, you can do that, no problem. Combing your hair, you can do it, no problem. You want to comb your hair because again, maybe the journey is long, maybe you're on the coach, on the plane, by the time you get to Mecca, you're a bit disheveled. So you comb your hair, no problem, you can comb your hair. But when you comb your hair, it's very possible there'll be the odd hair that falls out here and there. Again, you're not responsible for that. That isn't the prohibition of removing or cutting hair, that you comb your hair and the odd hair falls out. Nothing wrong with that. You can comb your hair, no problem. Also, sometimes your nail breaks. You might pick up your suitcase and just the way your finger hits, your nail breaks. Then that nail, you can't pull it off and get rid of it. When it's broken off like that, it's just hanging there at the edge, you can pull it off and get rid of that. That's okay. That isn't considered having cut your nails or trimmed your nails. That there now has broken by itself, you can get rid of it. That's okay, that's no problem. We said it's impermissible to cover your head, but it's perfectly permissible to use an umbrella. You can use an umbrella which is covering your head, but it is not a direct covering of the head. It's not a direct covering, something that goes onto your head and covers it. An umbrella above your head to stop the sun, permissible. People think, no, but that's covering your head. That isn't covering your head. You can have an umbrella above to stop the sun, and some people especially may need that. Perhaps somebody elderly or with children, you need an umbrella, especially at certain times of the year when it's 40, maybe getting close to 50 degrees there. That is permissible to have an umbrella. الاستظلال بالمظلة الشمسية والخيمة ونحوها جائز. So you can have an umbrella, that's permissible. Also, sitting inside of a tent, which more so applies in Hajj. Some people think, no, you can't go inside of a tent because then you're going to cover your head. Inside the tent, it's like your head is covered now. You got a ceiling over your head. That is not the meaning. You can go into a tent, you can sit down in the tent. That isn't covering your head. Covering your head is getting something like this, putting it onto your head, some cloth, some hat, some item that you put on your head to cover your head. An umbrella or sitting inside of a tent, that isn't considered covering your head. Also, from the things that are permissible, wearing a belt when you're in the state of ihram, as many people do, especially those who perhaps are not confident with their skills of tying their ihram. then they may wear those belts to keep the ihram in place. Perfectly permissible to wear those belts. And a lot of those belts have little pockets in them to put your money and things. You can use those belts, no problem. Wearing your watch whilst you do Umrah, permissible. That's not considered clothing. That's not considered stitched to the shape of your body. You can keep your watch on. Glasses, permissible. You can wear your glasses. Somebody has prescription glasses, you can wear them. Shades, the scholars maybe, there's less speech about that. If there's no need, then there's no need to wear them. If somebody has a need because of the shining marble and your eyes and things, then fair enough. But if there's no need to put them on just for the sake of putting them on. You don't put the shades on in ihram for the sake of just putting them on. But if you need them, genuinely need them, then it can be worn. But normal prescription glasses, no problem with that at all, they can be worn. Also, what is permissible during Umrah, during your ihram, is to wear shoes. People think that you cannot wear shoes when you do your Umrah. It's perfectly permissible to wear shoes, as long as with one condition. They have to be below your ankles. You cannot wear any shoes that come above the ankles. They have to be below the level of the ankles, then those shoes are permissible to wear. Some people, they think, no, you have to wear sandals only, you have to wear flip-flops only, you have to make sure a certain percentage of your foot is uncovered. Not necessarily, there are no evidences for that. You can wear shoes as long as they are below the level of your ankles. They are not shoes coming up to your ankle or above your ankle. So, what are the permissible things in summary then? When you're in ihram, you can take a shower, no problem. When you're in ihram, you can scratch where needed, no problem. You can wear a belt, no problem. You can wear a ring. If a person has the habit of wearing a ring, you can keep that on. You don't have to take off your ring for ihram, permissible to keep that on. Glasses if needed, umbrella, you can use that, no problem. All of those kinds of things are permissible when you're in ihram. So now then, moving on to, now we've done some of the general prerequisites. We've done some of the things that are allowed, contrary to what people may have thought. Now, going into the actual description of how you perform your Umrah step by step. Firstly, al-ihram. At the boundary, so if you're coming from Medina, for example, you barely get out of Medina, 10 minutes outside, you get to the boundary. There's a big mosque there, Dhul Hulayfa. From there, you now make your intention that you are in the state of ihram. You are now a muhrim. You are now performing Umrah. And when you make that intention, there is what's known as the talbiyah. The talbiyah, or your intention as you make it, you basically would say, Labbaik Allahumma Umratan. Labbaik Allahumma Umratan. And sometimes they add La riya'an fiha wa la sum'ah. La riya'an fiha wa la sum'ah. That, oh Allah, I am here in your service to perform Umrah. Labbaik means I'm here, oh Allah, in your service, answering your call. Labbaik. Labbaika Allahumma Umrah. Oh Allah, I have answered your call. I'm here in your service to perform Umrah. That's what it means. Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. La riya'an fiha wa la sum'a. Without any showing off involved in it. Sincerely for you, O Allah, I am here to perform Umrah. Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. That's what you can say. The intention is of course in your heart, but you can say that. And that is done at the boundary. You make your intention at the boundary, you do not go past the boundary. So now if you're on the train that goes from Medina to Mecca, then you got to make sure you make this intention before that train goes past the boundary. Then we said that there are these different boundaries and you have to make this intention, have your ihram on before you go past these boundaries. There are 5 boundaries in total. 5 boundaries in total. The furthest away is the boundary of Medina. The boundary of Medina from Dhul Hulayfa, which is approximately 400 kilometers away. It's basically in Medina. You basically come out of Medina and the boundary is there. If you're coming from Iraq, from the direction of Iraq, the boundary is a lot closer. It's barely 100 kilometers outside of Mecca. Barely 100 kilometers outside of Mecca. If you're coming further down now from the kind of eastern side, then the boundary there is actually only 78 kilometers outside. It's only 78 kilometers away. Further down towards the south, you're coming from the Yemeni side. From there, the boundary is at a location of 120 kilometers away. And if you're coming from the western side, which would be the side of the aeroplanes, if you're coming from the west, just before you land into Jeddah, you go past the miqat. That one is 186 kilometers from Mecca. How do we know these distances? They are in the narrations. They are in the Sunnah. There are hadith telling us about all of these boundaries and where they are. So the furthest one is the Medina one, 400 kilometers away. The others, you can see some of them are a lot closer, 180, 120, 180, a lot closer the other sides, but the Medina side is the furthest boundary. So when you go into ihram, depending on where you're coming from, which direction you're going to come into Mecca from, then the relevant boundary that applies to you, when you get to that, make sure you're in ihram, you make your intention before you go past it. And then you start saying the talbiyah, the actual talbiyah. لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك لبيك اللهم لبيك. Oh Allah, I am here answering your call in your service, in your obedience. لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك. I have answered your call in your subservience or in your service to worship you without any partners. إن الحمد ونعمة لك والملك. The praise and all the blessing, the kingdom, the dominion belongs to you. لا شريك لك, without any partners or equals. And you say that. لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد ونعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك. The men raise their voice with that. You raise your voice and you say that. Once you get to the boundary and onwards, up until you get there, you keep saying that. Sunnah to say that. Labbaik, Allahumma labbaik. But it is not sunnah that everybody does it together how people do it. All of the group. You have the leader at the beginning, Labbaik, Allahumma labbaik. And then everybody at the back, Labbaik, Allahumma labbaik. The whole group. لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك, and then everybody لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك. It's not a congregational thing. There is no sunnah to do it like that. The sunnah is everybody themselves, the men. The women don't do it with their raised voices. The men with the raised voices, everyone does it. لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك. You do it. You do it and you carry on doing it all the way, carry on doing it until you arrive. And so you raise your voice by yourself individually, facing the Qibla, and you do it, and you keep repeating it up until you arrive in Mecca. So now when you arrive in Mecca and you go to the mosque, When you arrive at the mosque, it is mentioned that you make the normal dua. Make the normal dua when entering. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allahumma aftah li abwaba rahmatik. The normal dua that you would make for going into the mosque. Oh Allah, open for me the doors to your mercy. Allahumma aftah li abwaba rahmatik. As you enter the mosque. And just as usual, you enter the mosque like any other mosque with your right foot. Remember these small sunnah actions for the increase in reward. Enter with your right foot when you enter the mosque. And when you enter the mosque, the one thing that you don't do, which you would normally do going into any other mosque, is Tahiyatul Masjid. When you're going for Umrah, when you walk into the mosque, there is no Tahiyatul Masjid. You don't walk in and then pray Tahiyatul Masjid. You go straight into your Umrah. So no prayer, you go straight into your Umrah, unless there is an obligatory prayer you need to pray. Unless the Jama'ah is on, or there's a prayer that you need to pray. Maybe you get there half an hour before Asr time and you haven't prayed your Dhuhr yet, or something. There's a prayer that you need to pray, then of course pray it. But otherwise, just Tahiyatul Masjid, etc., you don't pray that, you go straight into it. So going straight into it, the first thing you're going to go to, of course, is the tawaf. That is the first thing you would go to straight away. However, what if, again, you've been traveling all that time, it's been a long journey, and you get to the mosque and you're so tired, you just want to sit down for half an hour before you start your Umrah. In that case, you do pray Tahiyatul Masjid then. Then pray it because you want to sit down for a while before you start your Umrah. Then pray it because the Messenger said, إِذَا دَخَلَ أَحَدُكُمُ الْمَسْجِدَ فَلَا يَجْلِسْ حَتَّى يُصَلِّيَ رَكَعَتَيْنِ. When one of you enters the mosque, don't sit down until you pray 2 raka'at. So if you want to sit down and take a break first, then pray your 2 raka'at. As for if you're going to go straight into the Umrah, then there is no sitting down. Tawaf, sa'i, everything, you're not going to sit down. So if you're going to sit down, you want to take a break first, then pray your 2 raka'at in that case, and then you can sit down and then begin your Umrah. So now then, whether you did that or not, you are now heading to the Kaaba. As you head to the Kaaba, when you first see the Kaaba, it is narrated from some of the companions that they used to make a dua when they first set sight on the Kaaba. عند رؤية الكعبة تدعو اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام فحينا ربنا بالسلام. That, oh Allah, you are As-Salam, the name of Allah. And from you comes the salam, that's safety and security and those affairs. So cause us to live, our Lord, with that safety and salam. It is mentioned from some of the companions, they would say that upon their first vision of the Kaaba when they arrive for Umrah. And these days, especially the way that the Haram is and the refurbishment and things that are going on, you have to walk through several alleyways and several types of pathways until you actually get your first sight of the Kaaba. In the olden days, as soon as you walked into the mosque, you could see the Kaaba. As soon as you walk in, you could see the Kaaba all the way down. Now impossible, you have to walk this way, that way, one way, sideways, and then you finally get to the area where you see the Kaaba. So it is mentioned from the companions, they would make this dua when they first saw the Kaaba. Allahumma anta as-salam wa minka as-salam fahayyina rabbana bis-salam. And you can raise your hands with that. That's like a proper dua. When you first see the Kaaba, you raise your hands and make this dua. Allahumma anta as-salam wa minka as-salam fahayyina rabbana bis-salam. You can do that dua. Shaykh al-Albani says it's mentioned from some of the companions that they would do so. So now then you've done that and you walk up to the Kaaba and you want to begin your tawaf. You need to go to where? The green light, but the green light, they made it these days. There was no green light before. You just go to the black stone. You go to the black stone, which, yes, you're right. They have the light and everything there to show you where it is. But the point is, you go to the black stone. That's where you're going to begin the tawaf. Usually these days, the way the system is and where you walk in from, you walk in on the other side. So you have to walk around like you're doing tawaf, but you're not. You're just walking to get to the start point. And when you get to the start point, the black stone, that's where you're going to begin your tawaf. So when you get to the black stone, then you say, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. And you say that every time you come around to the black stone. You go around, you've done a circuit, you're at the black stone, you say it again, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. You go around, you get back to it, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. Every time you come around, you would say, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. So you start at the black stone, the Kaaba is on your left hand side. You're going around anti-clockwise. The Kaaba is always on your left hand side doing the tawaf. And so you would begin at the black stone. If you are able, then you attempt to kiss the black stone. And you attempt to put your head onto the black stone. If you're able. If you're able, you attempt to put your head on the black stone and to kiss the black stone. If you are able. If you are not able, then you can touch it with some item and then kiss that item, which these days isn't possible. It's not possible to try and use some stick or something. It's impossible with the amount of people and the crowding. So that wouldn't be an option these days. So if you can't do that either, then you simply indicate to the black stone. Indicate to it, point to it, and say, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. Point to the black stone and say, Allahu Akbar. Whilst you're doing the tawaf, there are no specific set du'as that you have to read. You generally read whatever you want. You can be reciting Qur'aan as you're going around. You can be making du'a for something as you're going around. General supplication and du'a and Qur'aan as you're going around. There is no specific du'a as you're going around. So you can be seeking forgiveness from Allah أثناء الطواف تدعو بأي دعاء تعرفه وتستغفر وتقرأ القرآن وتسأل الله خير الدنيا والآخرة وتصلي على النبي وتذكر الله كثيرا. So you go around supplicating, making dua, reciting Qur'an, generally as you're going around in tawaf. From the types of good supplications that you can do, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, Subhanallah wa bihamdih, Subhanallah al-Azim. These kinds of du'as are in the hadith. So generally doing these kinds of du'as, they are the good du'as. And any other du'a and Qur'an, you can be doing that when you're going around in tawaf. You start at the black stone, you go around, and you get to the corner before the black stone corner. The corner before the black stone corner is known as the Yemeni corner. That is known as the Yemeni corner. When you pass the Yemeni corner, that side of the Kaaba between the Yemeni corner and the black stone, you're supposed to recite the dua, the ayah, ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Our Lord, give us goodness in this world and in the afterlife, and protect us from the punishment of the fire. Every time in that section between the Yemeni corner and the black stone, you say that. In every round that you make. Also, when you're doing tawaf, there is a sunnah that is known as al-ittiba', which is that you expose your shoulder and arm, one shoulder and arm. And which shoulder and arm is exposed, the left or the right? The right. So يسن للرجل الاتباع وهو إظهار الكتف الأيمن. So you get your ihram and take it under your arm. Your shoulder and right arm is left open. Ihram under your arm. That's just for when you do tawaf. When you finish tawaf, and this is one of the biggest mistakes you see them doing. When you finish tawaf, you're supposed to put it back on again. The sa'i is done normal, not with your arm out. But how many people do you see carrying on thinking you got to do that for the whole Umrah? So this is only in the tawaf. You expose your right side, arm and shoulder, and leave that out. So then you do 7 circuits around the Kaaba, starting from the black stone. You get back to the black stone, you've done 1. Go around, back to the black stone, you've done 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You do 7 circuits around the black stone, around the Kaaba. And something to remember is, you've seen the Kaaba and in one side of it there's a semicircle. That is part of the Kaaba. When you do tawaf, you have to make sure you go around the outside of that semicircle. Don't go inside thinking I'm sticking next to the Kaaba and you go inside that semicircle. That's incorrect. You stay outside of that semicircle because that is considered part of the Kaaba. The original foundations were different, and so you stay outside of that. The Yemeni corner, what are you supposed to do with that? The fast walk is something else. The fast walk, we're going to get to that in a minute, known as ar-ramal. That is done in the first 3 circuits. The first 3 times you go around, you do the ramal, which is not running. It is, the way that you describe it is short, quick footsteps. Not running where you're taking big steps. Short, quick footsteps. That's ramal. So you move quickly. Short, quick footsteps. Not big steps and you're trying to run through like that. That isn't ramal. Ramal is short, quick footsteps going around. Like you're kind of hopping through, going around. You do that in the first 3 circuits. But the Yemeni corner, in the Yemeni corner, you are supposed to, if you can, touch it. Touch it if you can. في كل شوط تستلم الركن اليماني بيدك إن استطعت. But there is no dua. You don't say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar or anything like that. There's no dua. You just touch it if you can. And you don't kiss it either. You don't kiss it, you don't make any dua, nothing. Just touch it if you can. That's it. The Yemeni corner. Yemeni corner. Touch it if you can. If you can't touch it, then what? Then you don't do anything. If you can't touch it, there's no indication to the Yemeni corner. The The indication is only to the black stone. So if you get to touch the Yemeni corner, excellent. If you don't do any pointing to the Yemeni corner. It's just touch it if you can or nothing. That's with the Yemeni corner. Also, when you're making tawaf, you are supposed to be upon purification. You're supposed to be upon wudu. And if your wudu breaks, then what you need to do is go out, make wudu, and come back. And these days, to do that, to go out of the tawaf, make wudu, and come back, could take you at least 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes. To leave the tawaf, go out, make wudu, come back in, it would take you maybe 30 to 45 minutes. So ideally, you don't want to break wudu when you're doing your tawaf. There's a big difficulty on you then to go out and come back, 40 minutes, 45 minutes possibly. But when you do come back, you can carry on from the circuit you are on. So if you were in your third circuit, go to the black stone and start from your third circuit. That's your third one now, fourth, carry on. You can continue from where you were. After you finish the 7 circuits, then you then go to Maqami Ibrahim. That's that golden kind of thing you see in front of the Kaaba near the black stone. That golden kind of thing. In there's a rock with footsteps in it. Footsteps engraved in a rock inside of that golden thing. And that is supposed to be what? When Ibrahim alayhi salam built the Kaaba with Ismail alayhi salam, he built it and kept building the walls higher and higher until he couldn't reach the top of the wall to put the bricks on or the stones on. So Ismail came with a big rock and Ibrahim would stand on that big rock, and then Ismail would pass him the stones, and then Ibrahim would put them onto the top of the Kaaba. That stone that he was standing on, his footprints became engraved in it. And that is the stone. But the footsteps that are in the stone are not actually anymore the original footsteps of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Those original footsteps were eroded away by the elements, rain and other things. The footsteps disappeared from the rock. So what they've done now is just a representation, just to show you that this is supposed to be the footsteps of Ibrahim. They are not the original footsteps anymore. Those original footsteps have been long gone. Hundreds of years ago, Ibn Kathir, he wrote in Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, those footsteps are not the original anymore. Hundreds of years they've not been there, the original ones anymore. But that is the rock to symbolize that. You go behind there and pray 2 raka'at. Go behind there and pray 2 raka'at. As it says in the Qur'an, وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. Pray the 2 raka'at behind Maqami Ibrahim. And at this stage now, you cover your arm up. Cover your arm up and then pray. As soon as you finish your tawaf, the arm thing is finished now. Put your ihram back on. Go to the Maqami Ibrahim and pray 2 raka'at. Again, it's not a condition to be right behind Maqami Ibrahim. If it's so busy, you're at the side slightly, no problem. Anywhere in the general direction behind it. In the first raka'ah, you're supposed to recite قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. In the second one, you're supposed to recite قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Then after you finish praying, what do you do then? Go drink water. Go and drink the Zamzam water. And you can make a dua that is mentioned from some of the companions. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'a wa rizqan wasi'a wa shifa'an min kulli da. It's mentioned from some of the companions, as Shaykh Al-Albani said, that you face the Kaaba, make this dua, oh Allah, I ask you for beneficial knowledge and for expansive rizq and for cure from every illness. And so you drink the water, the Zamzam water, and it is sunnah that you pour it on your head as well. Pour it on your head, properly pour it, not just a little bit, properly pour some water onto your head. Drink it and pour it onto yourself. Then after you've done that, what do you do next? Safa Marwa looks like you want to finish quickly. There's one more thing you can do first. We just said that. You poured the water on your head. After that,
You go back to Maqam Ibrahim.
not Maqam Ibrahim, you go back to the black stone. Go back to the black stone and do one more touching of it if you can, or most likely just an indication again. You do one more. Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. And then after that, you're going to go to do the sa'i. So when you finish your tawaf, the first thing you're going to do is put your ihram back on. You're going to go pray your 2 raka'at with قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. You're going to go drink your water, pour it on yourself, then go back to the black stone. Then you're finally going to go and do the sa'i. And when you go to the sa'i, you first approach which mountain? Safa. And that's because in the Qur'an, when Allah mentioned the 2 mountains, Safa was mentioned first. Inna as-Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah. So the Prophet said, Nabda'u bima bada Allahu bih. We'll start with what Allah started with in the Qur'an. When Allah mentioned them, He mentioned Safa first. Inna as-Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah in the ayah. So the Messenger said, we'll begin with what Allah began with, Safa. So you go to Safa, and as you approach Safa, then you go up the mountain. And of course, these days now, there is no real possibility of climbing anywhere. You can go up slightly, but the actual top of what's left is blocked off now. You can no longer go on it. 15, 20 years ago, it was open still. You could go to the top of it, but now it's all closed off. So you go to where you can go up to where the barrier is, and then there is the dua. You face the Qibla, go up there as far as you can on Safa, face the Qibla, and in fact, as you're approaching it, you can say the ayah, Inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah. And then when you get to it, turn around, face the Qibla, and then Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له أنجز وعده ونصر عبده وهزم الحساب وحده وتكرر هذا الذكر 3 تدعو بما تشاء بين ذكرين. You say that dua the first time, then you make your own dua whatever you want. Then you say this dua again, then you make your own dua whatever you want. Then you say this dua again, so now you said it for the 3rd time, then you move on to Marwa. So you say this dua, you make your own. You say this dua, you make your own. You say this dua, then you move on to Marwa. As you're moving along to Marwa, there is of course that area in between where it is sunnah to run. For the men, it is not a sunnah for the elderly or the women to run in that area. And if the men have women with them, then it's not a sunnah for you to run in that area. Look after your women then if you need to look after the women or elderly or children. But if you're capable and there's no other burden on you, then it is a sunnah to run in that area. And it's a sunnah to properly run in that area. Properly run if you're able. If there's space, you have an opportunity, there's an opening in front of you, properly run. That is a sunnah to do so at that stage there. And during the sa'i, once again, there is no specific dua. You can be making any dua during the sa'i, Qur'an, dhikr, supplication, whatever it might be. When you're in the running area, there is a dua that some of the companions mentioned you can do. رَبِّ اغْفِرْ وَارْحَمْ إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْأَعَزْ الْأَكْرَمُ. Mentioned from some of the Salaf, they would say that. So it is possible you could do that when you're going through the green area. There are some additional things. What time are we at now? No. There are just a few additional things. And these are very difficult these days because of the refurbishment and what's going on in the haram. They're difficult to implement. But if you're able, then there is a sunnah, Shaykh al-Albani mentions, if you're able to start Safa Marwa, the sa'i, by going in from Babu Safa. There's one of the doors called Babu Safa. If you're able to go in through there, that's a good thing, as Shaykh al-Albani mentions. So when you actually get onto the mountain, what you're supposed to do is actually try and see the Kaaba. When you make that dua, and then your own dua, then that dua, then your own dua, then that dua, you're actually trying to get a view of the Kaaba if you can. Again, very difficult these days. But if you find somewhere you get a view of it, that's what you should try and do. From Safa, when you get to Marwa, that is considered as one leg. From Marwa back to Safa is your second leg. From Safa back to Marwa, that's your third now. Back to Safa 4, to Marwa 5, to Safa 6, to Marwa 7, you finished. The biggest mistake people make here is they think you start at Safa, go to Marwa, come back to Safa, and they think you've done one. You've actually done two. From one mountain to the other one is one. From that mountain back to the first one, you've done your second one now. So some people end up doing how many? 14, double. They end up doing double, and that is incorrect. From one mountain to the other is one section. So every time you get to the mountain, you start at Safa, you do that dua. You get to Marwa, face the Kaaba, do the dua. Safa, face the Kaaba, do the dua. Every time. The last mountain you're going to get to, the end of your seventh leg is going to be Marwa. You don't stop on that one. Your last one, when you get to Marwa, you get there, you walk out. You don't stop on your last seventh one, your final stop on Marwa. You don't stop to make dua. When you get to your last leg on Marwa, you get there now, you've done 7 now, you walk out, that's it. There is no stopping on the last one. You're only going to stop in the previous ones, not when you finish your last 7th one and you get to Marwa. So now when you finish and you walk out, what's left? The only thing left now is to cut the hair, to shave the hair. It is better and preferred to shave completely. And if a person doesn't do that, you can still shorten and the obligation is fulfilled. Shave completely the whole head or shorten the whole head, then that obligation is completed. It is incorrect to just get a couple of hairs and chop them or snip a couple of hairs from this side or that side. That is incorrect. You have to shorten the whole side, the whole of the head, the whole area, not just little bits here or there. So that is the completion then, the final act, which is the shaving of the head or the cutting of the hair. The women, of course, have to do that too, but they can just take from the bottom of the hair like a fingernail worth, a centimeter or whatever it is. The women chop the bottom of their hair off. And that is then also considered as the women having completed the act of cutting the hair.
Is there not a dua you say when you leave the mosque? Or leave the masjid area?
A general, but nothing specific to Umrah. A general dua of leaving the mosque, you can do that, but there's no specific dua for leaving or completing Umrah. That is the overall description. Any questions on any of the description or anything in there? That is basically the description of Umrah. That covers all the main aspects. You understand what is ihram, when you have to put it on, where the boundaries are, what you're allowed to do when you're in ihram, what you're not allowed to do when you're in ihram, the performance of Umrah when you first get into the mosque, Tahiyatul Masjid or not, depending if you're going to sit down or not. Go to the black stone first, make your indication, begin. First 3 circuits, you're going to do the short, quick footsteps with the shoulder uncovered. Every time you get to the Yemeni corner, you're going to try and touch it. If you can't, nothing else to be done. Carry on. After the Yemeni corner, before you get to the black stone, you're going to say, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. You're going to try and touch the black stone. If not, make the indication. Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. Carry on again and again and again, 7 times. When you're doing your 7th one, you're going to put your ihram back on. Go to Maqami Ibrahim, anywhere in the vicinity behind it. Pray your 2 raka'at with قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. After you finish that, you're going to go drink the water and then pour it on your head, unless you're doing it in Ramadan and you're fasting. Then you don't do the drinking, of course. And you're most likely not even going to do pouring on the head, because there's no water available in Ramadan if you do your Umrah during the day. But in any case, if you can, then you go do that. And then you go back and do one more indication of the black stone. Then you go to Safa first. As you're approaching, you can say the dua, Inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah. You begin on Safa, go to the top as far as you can go, face the Qibla, see if you can see it, make your dua, or the dua that we mentioned, then your own dua, then this dua, then your own dua, then this dua. Then go off towards Marwa, in between the 2 green posts, the green area. You're supposed to run as fast as you can if you're able. And the dua that was mentioned from some of the companions, you can do that. Otherwise, any general dua. You get to Marwa, climb as high as you can. There's nothing much to climb Marwa, there's nothing there really now. Climb to whatever the highest point is there. Face the Qibla to the direction of it. Very difficult to see the Qibla, but one thing is the tiles on the floor tiles, no matter where you are in the Haram, they all face towards the Kaaba. Wherever you are in the Haram, if you don't know, you lost your bearings, you look down, which way are the tiles lined up? That is going to the Qibla. And that's obviously done so that wherever you are in the Haram, you know which way to start lining up for the prayer. You just look down, wherever the tiles are facing, that's where it's going to the Kaaba. So on Marwa, you stand there, do your dua, you do that 7 times. On the 7th one, no dua, you walk out, shave your head, or at least trim it all, and that is the completion.